explain why the Republican health care plan stalled and what happened next. And could President Trump face a re-election primary challenge from local Republican David Jolly?
If that opportunity arose, it's of course something I'd strongly consider.
Plus, we'll dig into wasted money one-on-one with House Speaker Richard Corcoran. And as we approach Independence Day, we have a special salute to the Bay Area patriots who keep the American spirit alive. This is Money, Power, and Politics. We'll start with a closer look at why the Senate health care plan got delayed. First, Republicans are having the same problem replacing Obamacare that Democrats had in passing it. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich nailed it.
So half the Republican problem, or more than half, is a communications problem.
Yes, health care reform is complicated and difficult to explain for starters, and Republicans have not found a strong communicator like Reagan or Kennedy or Bill Clinton to sell it. Again, Democrats had the exact same problem for years. Remember how President Obama tried to explain health care.
And they got some treatment and a breathalyzer, or an inhalator, not a breathalyzer.
And remember how the Democratic lawmakers who passed it tried to explain it.
I think it's very confusing. I know my time is up, but I think it's very confusing.
And remember how former Vice President Joe Biden tried to explain it.
Still occasionally get a glitch. It's just a pain in the neck.
And how former President Obama tried to explain it yet again.
Since I'm in charge, obviously we screwed it up.
Yeah, Democrats put on a clinic in poor communications for years, and now Republicans are muffing their optics and words as well.
Nobody dies because they don't have access to health care.
And the president has also rolled out maddening contradictions and sent a lot of mixed signals that are not helping his case.
And I'm not going to cut Medicare or Medicaid.
He promised to not cut Medicaid or health care for the poor over and over again.
They want to do it on Medicaid. And we can't do that. And it's not fair to the people that have been paying in for years, and now all of a sudden they want to be cut.
He also called for universal government-funded health care.
Everybody's got to be covered. This is an un-Republican thing for me to say.
Universal health care.
I am going to take care of everybody.
Who pays for it?
The government's going to pay for it.
And then after that, he promoted a House plan that sharply cuts Medicaid. And according to the Congressional Budget Office, would mean an additional 20 million people would lose health insurance.
But very importantly, it's a great plan. And this is a real plan. But we're just going to talk a little bit about the plan, how good it is.
How great is it?
I actually used my term, mean. That was my term.
That's right. After it hit resistance with Republicans in the Senate, the president said the same plan he sold as so great and well-crafted was mean.
Mean. That was my term.
Again, the president called the same plan he embraced and sold mean. Then he called it mean again on national TV after hearing former President Obama call it mean.
What do you say to the former president?
Well, I actually used my term, mean. That was my term.
Again, when you're trying to explain a complicated plan, contradictions and mixed signals don't help.
What we have is something very, very incredibly well-crafted.
Mean. That was my term.
This is a great plan.
Mean.
This has really brought the Republican Party together.
And then as the Republican Party pulled apart in the Senate, the president said they must take action, but if they don't, it'll be okay.
We have really no choice but to solve this situation. And if we don't get it done, it's just going to be something that we're not going to like, and that's okay.
Again, remember what Newt Gingrich says is getting in the way.
So half the Republican problem, or more than half, is a communications problem.
And now Republicans also have a time problem here, as in the more time passes, the more time the resistance has to protest and run ads and flood lawmakers and perhaps delay a vote yet again and again. And we're heading into the next election season already.
I think we've got a really good chance of getting there. It'll just take us a little bit longer.
Yes, Mitch McConnell can still get a replacement plan passed, but at this point, it will not be easy to win over holdouts in his own party.
That I have so many fundamental problems with the bill that have been confirmed by the CBO report.
Now, the CBO report also does not help the Republicans' case. Again, it projects an additional 22 million people would lose health coverage under the current Senate plan. Republicans, though, are correctly pointing out that that's only a best guess, and as it relates to health care, The CBO's best guesses have often been quite wrong. But Republican leaders also need to keep working with their own members who have concerns, and they should also perhaps try working with Democrats, as the president has suggested, even though he, in yet another mixed signal, also dismissed Democrats who asked for a seat at the table.
The Republicans and Democrats don't get together, and I'm open arms.
Now, as Republicans try to work their problems in Washington, Republicans in Florida also have been divided over taxes and spending, and they have some problems still of their own, which brings us to tonight's Spotlight. Well, last week we took yet another look at tax credits intended to fight poverty and blight and crime pouring into fairly nice communities and high-end resorts, in particular in the Orlando area. House Speaker Richard Corcoran, you fought for reforms, as did Representative Renner, that in final negotiations failed in the Senate. How can it fail in the Senate? Take us behind the scenes. What happened?
Well, honestly, this is a perfect example of when government goes out there and gets involved in areas that it shouldn't be involved in, or trying to socially engineer how things work. It builds constituencies, and those constituencies make contributions and influence the process. We passed it off the House floor. It failed in the Senate, but I think we'll come back and we'll fix it, because it's a program that is not working.
On the subject of negotiations, you on the outset promised the most transparent process in state history. Then you took your lumps, because in the final negotiations, at least, there was a lot of meeting and talking behind closed doors. Do you think that is fair criticism, and what more can you do to make the process more transparent going forward?
Two good questions, Greg. One is it's not fair criticism. The reality is that we had the most open, transparent budget process, not only in the history of the state of Florida, but maybe in the history of the nation. For the first time, if you wanted to put something in the budget as we call it, pork, you had to file a standalone bill. It had to be filed before session, and you could have no last-minute entries. What can we do to make things better is again, push the envelope on those transparency measures. If you remember, and we probably talked about it, the Senate, when we said that's what we want in our House rules and they have to abide by it too, they threatened to sue us. That they wanted to be able to do it all in darkness, and we said, go ahead and sue us. We'll pay your filing fee.
House Speaker Corcoran, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, now on Tuesday night, we'll celebrate the 4th with fireworks, of course, and a special edition of our show. And tonight, we're kicking off the week with something very special as well. Merissa Lynn is here with a man who would make our founding fathers proud.
Craig, this all started out with a love of photography. Andrew Loomish sees the beauty in cemeteries, but he also sees how filthy some of the headstones have become over the years. He sees the final resting spots of those who served this country are unkept, and that just doesn't sit right with him. So he decided to do something about it.
The people that are here are heroes. You walk through these cemeteries and there's generations of soldiers who fought for the rights that we enjoy today.
Andrew Loomish spends his free time with these heroes who are no longer with us.
Now that they're gone, they're ignored, and not only are they ignored, they're neglected.
So he washes away that neglect to uncover a piece of American history at Woodlawn Cemetery in Tampa. On this day, he chose Chauncey Wells, a soldier who fought in the Civil War. He died 113 years ago, meaning a century's worth of dirt and sediment has settled onto Mr. Wells' headstone.
Mr. Wells, who I'm restoring now, was originally from Michigan. He was an infantryman for the Union. I clean these monuments for the purpose of being able to tell a story so that people can see and view the individuals who are buried here and once lived amongst us.
He digs deep into the lives of soldiers who served our country to shed light on not only their military service, but who they were as people.
I try to bring the living person who's no longer living back to life, to understand that it's not just a rock, it's not just a piece of stone, but it's a human being that's under there, and they had a life, they had a family, they had children that loved them. They served their country.
Loomish has restored more than 500 monuments, taking about 2 months from start to finish. It takes several applications of cleaning solution to make these headstones look like new again.
Here is our Civil War Union Soldier Medal of Honor winner. Her name is Frances Ursch. I restored his monument as well. Do you see the gold inlay? It's amazing. It actually has his Medal of Honor. He was a captain in the New York Infantry during the Civil War. An absolutely incredible, beautiful monument. I restored that probably a couple of years ago now, and it still looks fantastic.
He scrubs away the filth on his own time to deliver the respect soldiers deserve.
To see that our memories are so short that we don't remember and honor those people who allowed us to have what we have today, it's infuriating.
In their death, Loomish believes these veterans continue to deserve our appreciation.
When I do these restorations, I do step back. I feel I'm not always brought to tears, but I feel the emotion of those descendants that stood there. So I stand in their footsteps. I literally stand where they stood 100, 120 years later, and I can feel them. Am I brought to tears? Not necessarily, but do I feel their presence? I do.
This good cemeterian is the guardian of lost souls, preserving final resting places in American history. So here is the before and after of Chauncey Wells restoration. Andrew Loomish does incredible work, and for it, he's been honored by Arlington National Cemetery twice. Here in Florida, this good cemeterian has been honored by Governor Rick Scott with the Champion of Service Award. Loomish has cleaned the memorials of more than 500 veterans. Craig?
Thank you, Marissa. Coming up, former Congressman David Jolly says a fellow Republican like John Kasich should think about challenging the president for re-election, but Jolly, may also be considering running against the president himself. We'll show you how that could play out.
Can you imagine, colleagues, the fear and anxiety in this chamber if these 100 mosquitoes were outside this jar, not inside this jar?
David Jolly brought that jar of mosquitoes into the House chamber during the Zika crisis. He's a Republican who called out both parties. But then he ran against big money in politics and got run out of Washington. He lost his seat in Congress last year to Democrat Charlie Crist. But now Jolly is popping up all over the place on national shows.
Donald Trump's done. He's done.
And he's drawing national attention for his sharp criticism of President Trump, even questioning the president's intellect, as he did on CNN.
There's a bigger issue here I think the anxiety the American people are wrestling with, which is whether or not this president is intellectually qualified to be president of the United States.
Well, Jolly says he will run again for something, which makes us wonder, what will his next move be? And is he thinking about challenging Trump in the next Republican race for president? Okay, we're here now with David Jolly, Republican and former member of Congress, Pinellas County. Thank you so much for your time.
It's great to be with you.
You've been with us before. You've raised some strong qualms about the president and Republican leaders for not challenging him more as a Republican. You've called him a liar, have said he's not fit to serve. You've questioned his intellect. You also have said that the president on this path should face a primary from within his party.
Right.
What if nobody comes forward? Will you come forward and make some news for us? Would you consider it? You have more political experience than the president did at this juncture.
I'm not sure there's a draft David Jolly for president movement, but listen, we may see somebody like a John Kasich or others. I would also say this, it's a long ways out, and we may see the president settle into the role and begin to stabilize a little bit. But the truth is, this president took it sideways. Go back to the Muslim ban, go back to just the insulting rhetoric on the campaign trail, go back to Access Hollywood, go back to some of the misstatements he's had from foreign policy to domestic policy to saying he didn't realize health care was so hard, to frankly telling two different stories on James Comey. The reality is this is a president who has struggled with the truth, and Republicans need to hold him just as accountable as we held Barack Obama accountable for the past 8 years. Listen, everybody's going to make mistakes. It's the hypocrisy I can't embrace.
If there is a draft David Jolly movement, would you consider it?
I think this president, if the election were held this year, should be challenged from within our own party.
Would you rule out challenging him yourself?
If that opportunity arose, it's of course something I'd strongly consider. But again, I think there are more qualified people, and I would look to governors like John Kasich.
I want to take you through some of the comments I've received on social media.
Sure.
Same report on James Comey. Hey, Craig, thank you very much for being fair in your analysis of the Comey interview today. Also, another great spin on today's testimony. Character attack Comey and give Trump every escape. And Typical Fox News just now from you, biased and showing disdain for the president. And you know you should go with CNN. Our president hasn't gotten the respect from you ignorant people. All watching the exact same report and getting very different interpretations of it. What does that tell you?
It tells us that we are very divided, and this is where leaders need to lead, right? And that includes Donald Trump, that includes Democratic leaders, and here's what I mean by that. Take just the investigation into Russia, if you will. The president continues to say there's been no evidence, so why is there this witch hunt? Well, the reality is the investigation hasn't completely finished. We know that the Trump campaign, not the president himself, perhaps, we don't know, had contacts with the Russians 7 months before the election. We do know that the Russians tried to hack our elections, and in some cases successfully. Even Donald Trump acknowledged in January that was the case. So a leader should say, listen, let the investigation transpire because we need to get to the bottom of it, but let's not let it consume us. The reality is, in today's 24-hour news cycle and social media and Twitter, our passions come out and we are too quick to declare that we know what happened before the investigations transpired. And that just requires leadership, I believe, to say we're not going to feed into this frenzy. Look at the congressional shooting that we saw most recently. That is a product of this very toxic environment, and it's shameful. And so I think you've seen members of Congress step forward and say, listen, we really can have a contest of ideas without it turning into the vitriol and the personal attacks.
You have said it is an embarrassing time to be a Republican. Do you see where Charlie Crist may be coming from in having switched parties?
No, because I still believe in Republican center-right principles on taxes and regulation and healthcare and foreign policy. What Charlie Crist did was, perhaps because of his disenchantment with the party, he switched his positions on all those policies. Where does a guy like me go, Craig, a center-right Republican looking for a mainstream agenda in a Trump Republican Party? There is nowhere to go. And so listen, I'll also be honest. Yes, I struggle today with how Republican evangelicals have embraced Donald Trump after Access Hollywood and everything else he's done, and I say that as a Christian. I don't know how they have embraced this president because I haven't found a way to do that. At the same time, as a Christian, and frankly just a fellow human being, I will tell you, I've gone too far at times in my own criticism, right? We all get caught up in this vitriol that goes back and forth, and it is a sport. And at times I know I've gone too far, and so I apologize for that, but I need to do better, but the President of the United States certainly needs to do better as well.
David Jolly, thank you for your time.
You got it.
Now, coming up, we'll weigh in on the president's tit-for-tat with cable news host, Morning Joe folks, why it took off as it did and what this tells us about our country.
I don't think you can expect someone to be personally attacked day after day, minute by minute, and sit back. Look, the American people elected a fighter. They didn't elect somebody to sit back and do nothing.
Well, to that point, the president has been insulting people who criticize him for years. But many Republicans and Democrats think that he crossed the line this time by attacking some cable news hosts, calling one of them low IQ crazy Mika, the other one Psycho Joe, then saying that he refused to meet with Mika and Joe because she was bleeding from a facelift. Well, keep in mind the president has said far worse things about Rosie O'Donnell in the past. He said far worse things about other women to Billy Bush. So why does this then pull so much focus with so many other problems playing out all around the world? Well, first, the president, keep in mind, is at war with much of the national media, and many pundits and media contributors are therefore and also at war with him. So when he commits an unforced error, they will dwell and certainly fixate on it. And two, this is an unforced error because with a crisis in Syria and North Korea and a raging healthcare debate in this country, the president pulled focus from all of that with personal attacks, which distracts from his agenda and puts his party on defense. And in doing this, Trump gave the targets of his attacks a much larger audience than they would have had all around the world, which they since used to just pick him apart, among other things, accusing him of colluding with tabloids to try to blackmail them, which led to this back and forth of did not, did to, that distracted from the president's agenda even more. And third, he is no longer an entertainment celebrity where insults are not construed as scandalous. He's the president of the United States, and many people still expect the highest office of the land to be above the gutter. Coming up, we'll move beyond that gutter and show what brings us together and makes us all feel proud as we celebrate the 4th. It's our special presentation of America, Pride and Passion.
This is the iconic flying fortress that helped us win the last World War.
I forgot how big the sucker is.
And it's one of the last remaining B-17s that can still take flight. And we'll take a flight over Florida and through history.
Which ones would you like to see?
These ones right here.
And he finds lost treasure for war heroes and sends it home.
This is hard to talk about.
And she just got a medal she thought was lost forever.
I miss him.
That's a brief look at our full special presentation, America, Pride and Passion. You'll find it on our YouTube channel. Search for Craig Patrick's Money, Power, and Politics and click subscribe, folks. That is our show. We'll see you next week.